Hey, turning to tonight, what a great book.
Well, thank you.
What really, really great book.
I got those papers through a pure bizarre set of events that led them to me, and I got interested in the guy. And turns out they had a bunch of stuff at the South Carolina Department of Archives and History that had really never been delved into from when he was in the legislature there. And
Yeah.
the National Archives, of course, has the Freedmen's Bureau materials, and there's a lot of just unplowed stuff out there. So I figured, what the hell?
Well,
Very
it really
no other
came to,
there are also virtually no biographies of African American soldiers. There's obviously some collections of letters or whatever, but no biography that looks at someone's total life. Um,
well, I think you'll like, I did a review of it that's going to be in the, in our September electronic newsletter. And what I zeroed in on, the thing that was most important to me and what really spoke to me, Gordon, was really the post-war period.
mhm.
There's been so much raw emotion that has been tied up in this country, especially in the last couple of years, with all the politics intersecting and all this other stuff, and we got into a big confab over monuments and the history of monuments and taking
Sure.
them down and so forth. And I read a series of essays about 2 or 3 months ago when I was going up to Minot, North Dakota, to do the Custer program with Neil Mangum, and I read the essays, which were on the 54th Massachusetts and the rededication of the St. Gaudens Monument and so forth.
The Shaw Monument there.
Yeah, yeah, and I was really, really affected by it as I went more and more into it. I saw the different dimensions that were put forth with that. So much so that you remember I sent out a note and we were getting ready to open up that new network of education that we're going to be putting out on a regular basis that you volunteered to help with. And we've got other people like Fergus Bordowitz and folks like that have volunteered to do it. And look,
I know Fergus well. He'll be very good.
Yeah, I like Fergus a lot. He and you and Karen are living proof that people of different political ideologies really can get along if they just act civilly to each other.
Yeah, exactly. And we have common interests that have nothing to do with modern politics.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And Fergus and I have some wonderful, wonderful conversations. I mean, same thing with Paul McGid, who did the Crook biography. Is just I enjoy talking to smart people who have different ideas because I learn a lot. And when I read those essays and thought about them in context, they really spoke to me. And then, lo and behold, what happens? You come and drop this book on me. Talk about serendipitous. I mean, and when I read it, I was already geared because of our common interests. The Civil War portion, we all understand. I mean, I've led tours of Ulusty. We've done all the bits and pieces and stuff. It's the essence of the Black soldier who gets the opportunity to fight and contribute to his own freedom and what he does and how he does that. And then when you think in terms of the reconstruction of the South, and I find that it's a very difficult period to deal with because I think too many people see things in absolutes that, okay, today it is white, we can go turn off the switch and tomorrow it'll be dark, it'll be black. And I like to think of most of these problems as a continuum, and it's kind of like getting a stain in your good shirt. You may eventually get it out with a lot of washings, and each washing the stain gets a little lighter, but it never really goes away. And I see that as the essence of slavery within the United States and the generations having to deal with their own upbringing, because there's no common education base there.
Right.
People become racist not because they are born racist. There's no gene that's been discovered that makes a person predisposed to be a racist. It's time, circumstance, experience.
Right. Man, it's a cultural.
It's an acculturation.
And yeah, and no, I think that's a fascinating period in history. And of course, in South Carolina, it was an extraordinarily tumultuous period. And it's interesting also to look back at it and ask, how could it have been done better so that everybody could have gotten through what was a huge transition a lot smoother, because it was tough. There were a lot of assumptions made, such as the people who were former slaves can run governments, even though you're dealing with a population that's largely illiterate and really not acculturated to a lot of the norms of the rest of the society. And what
Sure.
kind of transition periods would have made a lot better results. And there's a lot of different ways to think about it, and I don't claim to have the answer.
Well, I don't either, and I think that the problem in trying to initiate the dialogue, I've told people, I've never shied away from it, but it has been difficult, especially within the Civil War community, is that oftentimes the Civil War community defines its own boundaries, and the boundaries are Cavaliers and cotton fields and Yankees and rebels and so forth, and they don't necessarily see the evolution of the society. I mean, even in the anti-slavery movement before the war, because of the nature of violence in American society, it wasn't a very smart thing for a man to get up and go stand up in front of a bunch of people and start talking about abolition.
Yeah.
You know, you get beaten, hung,
yeah.
what, tarred and feathered, run out of rails. So who are the voices of the anti-slavery movement before the war? They're the women, Lucretia Mott and the Grimke sisters from South Carolina and folks like that who see this and who are affected by the humanity of the people who are being denied their opportunities. And then you spend all this time, especially in the South, rationalizing that this was indeed a better state for these illiterate bumpkins that had just been displaced out of outer Slobovia in Africa and so forth, that had no means of competing effectively within the society they'd been drafted into. And so, you know, the South and many Northerners as well. I mean, lest we forget, the last major city in the United States to have court-ordered busing to achieve racial equality was Boston, Massachusetts. You know, and that was in the 1980s. For God's sakes, you know, where have we been? So I'm willing, and I'm hoping that it's going to be well received, and I'm going to try to move further with this. We have Laurie Schiller, who's on our board. Laurie is he had his PhD in African studies.
Okay.
And so I'm going to kind of unleash him as the lead on that.
Okay.
And we're going to start putting out a fair amount of balanced dialogue concerning all this. And I think that the time, after so many years of this, in all honesty, I can look you straight in the eye, Gordon. I could say it's time.
Yeah.
It's time. For as much as we've done this in the Civil War, as much fun as we've had with the Civil War, as much we've studied it, everybody seems to shy away from answering the question, so what? And this is the so what.
Yeah.
This man, this officer of the United States Army, this man who fought for the United States and then who wanted to contribute to society, is exactly the so what. And the response to him that you uncovered, and I'm sure was repeated time and again. I remember reading, was it Steve Bujanowski's book, The Bloody Shirt, Waving the Bloody Shirt,
Right.
which talked about violence in North Augusta, South Carolina,
Sure.
and violence in and around in the other states, whether it was the New Orleans race riots or whatever else. All this is the first washing of the stain of slavery. It's people who 2 years ago, Rufus was a slave, and now Rufus has a vote.
Yeah.
And Rufus worked on your farm, but he doesn't know anything other than farming. And you used to feed him and you gave him a place to live. And if he misbehaved, you beat him. Now you got to pay him to do the same thing he is. And you got the same person that 2 years ago had this guy as a slave, now is trying to deal with him and his humanity. And more than 100 years before the Civil Rights Acts, the defining Civil Rights Acts under Lyndon Johnson, that started moving us in the directions that should have taken place in the 1860s, instead took place in 1960s.
Yeah, and you get massive social dislocation on both ends, and it's a fascinating picture. And that's what I found so interesting about someone like Stephen Swales, who was so adept at maneuvering through a lot of those waters and getting things done and moving and moving the ball.
Well, what extraordinary capacity the man had.
Yeah.
Of course, we're dealing with, and this is something, and I looked and sent you notice to how I'd like to see this conversation try to unfold tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Is the recruitment of the 54th and 55th is different than all the other recruitments of former slaves and so forth, because we're dealing with an ostensibly literate group of people, somebody who's reasonably within that societal norm. Yeah. They just happen to be black.
And most of them were never slaves. Large portion of them were born free black, including Swales. So and you often wonder what their conversations were like, say, when they were down in South Carolina, next to the 1st or 2nd South Carolina regiments, which were comprised of former slaves who had just gotten their freedom a year or less before.
Yeah. Well, when Montgomery takes the South Carolinians to Darien, and you put the 54th next to the 1st, and you see the difference between people who heretofore have had no independence whatsoever, and now they're basically being unleashed by somebody who is not making any effort whatsoever to confine them, but rather just allows them to go out and run loose and free, and encourages them to do destruction and so forth. And then you have these other people who grew up in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New York, and elsewhere, who are looking at these and saying, "My God, what are these people are savages," and not meaning that in an intended offensive way, but merely looking at what was the challenge between one or the other, in which people who had been denied this for so long were capable of unleashing that degree of I don't think it's animosity, just that degree of independence, which was perhaps not well advised. And compare that with people who had jobs, who were literate, who were read, who got called in, who got recruited, who got brought in to the army, and then sent forward to do this. And then Swales' performance being so strong that universally everybody wants him. They want him commissioned.
Yeah.
And and having help holding a commission, still holding a commission, as all commissioned officers do, there is something extraordinary. I'm not a person who's egotistical, as you know, Gordon. It's not my nature. But the one thing that I never, ever, ever forget is that I'm a commissioned officer of the United States. I may be retired, but I served my country. I believe in what I did. I would do it again, and if called on, I would respond. And that degree of trust, when you give that to somebody, when you take somebody like Stephen Swales, and you say, "I'm entrusting you with that degree of responsibility," the ramifications that are just titanic. I mean, remember Flipper, the guy who's first black that went to West Point, and the cadets at West Point did not wish to accept him. Period. And he got put out of school on an honors violation because he was framed. I think eventually he got he was reconciled to that. He was forgiven and pardoned for that and stuff. But you know, I was at VMI. The very first blacks at VMI were seniors when I was a rat. So we'd only had blacks at VMI for the fourth year when I was there. And interestingly enough, my class in the fifth year of blacks at VMI, a class selected a black man to be one of the class officers. Our class vice president was Ronnie Norman, is a black man. And 10 years after that at VMI, the very first black man was the regimental commander of the Corps Cadets at VMI. Darren McDew, who got 4 stars, was U.S. Transportation Commander, just recently retired. So when you look at that, it's awe-inspiring, but also all of this adjustment has all happened in my lifetime.
Oh yeah,
our lifetime.
Oh yeah. Well, I grew up in Tennessee. I was born in 1945, so I've lived through all of those evolutions.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right.
And people, I think we had I don't know about your family, Gordon, but I was first one in my family to go to college of any sort.
I was the first in mine too. My mom never got out of high school, and my dad had 1 year of college. That was it. Right.
Same here.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
No, I'm just saying same here.
Same there. Well.
So, when you look at that and you start thinking, what a sea change has been made just over a short period of time, in which now college educations for all people are becoming almost standard operations. And yet we all sit here as 60, 70-year-old people, and we are the first college educated people in our strand of folks. For us, the Riedels and Salibis go back to 1880 is when we came to the United States. And so no Riedel or Salibi went to college between 1880 and 1972. Wow. Pretty extraordinary.
That is. Well, I had some ancestors who did go to college. A couple of them were preachers. My grandfather, believe it or not, became a lawyer. He was a farmer in Middle Tennessee. He became a lawyer, practiced law for 6 months and quit, and said no honorable person could be a lawyer.
You should have listened.
I'll never forget that.
Abraham Lincoln gave advice to these young men who wanted to be lawyers, saying if you can't be an honest lawyer, pick another profession.
There you go.
Did you ever see the movie Liar, Liar?
Oh, I don't remember it by name, but maybe
Jim Carrey. The movie's been out 20 years. It's about a lawyer who his son makes a birthday wish that for 24 hours his dad couldn't tell a lie.
Oh my God.
And he's got all sorts of court cases and everything, and the kid's
He blows
wish
them all,
takes
huh?
effect. He blows them all, and it's just so funny. Uh, uh, because he was considered to be a real slick shyster lawyer and stuff,
Yeah.
and he'd come up in front of the judge. He said, "I'd really like a continuance." He said, "Do you have a good reason?" He says, "No." He says, "Well, can I have a recess? I have to go to the bathroom." He says, "Can it wait?" He says, "Well, I'm told that if you hold on to it for long, it can cause permanent damage, and even perhaps cause problems with fertility and stuff." And judge says, "Well, maybe I better take a break too." And they go out. But the scenario unfolds. Some guy calls and he's talking to his secretary, and she says, "You have a call from so and so. He's down in the jail. He wants to know how he can stay out of jail." And Carrie picks up and he says, "Stop breaking the law, asshole."
Yeah.
Hangs up.
Real easy.
Yeah, it's just he seduces a woman. She says, who's a partner in the firm, and she says, "Oh man, that was incredible. Was it good for you too?" He says, "I've had better." Whap.
Yeah.
I mean, it's slapstick good fun and humor. It ought to be mandatory for every lawyer to watch it. You just get a kick out of it. So, but anyway, did I understand you're up in Maine right now?
Yeah, we're taking a little vacation. Yeah, it's nice. Haven't really had a break in a long time, and we had some good friends who own a cottage on a little island right off the Maine coast. So we were hanging out with them.
Did you get any rain and stuff from the tropical storm came
No,
through?
it blew itself out down there in New York, in Connecticut. It didn't get up to us. No rain, and it's been hot up here too. It's 88 today, I think.
Oh, that's got to be miserable up there, I would think.
Yeah, it's cooling off.
Yeah.
Days, but
Do you get a good sea breeze up there, or
Yeah.
was this just kind of sitting there on you with the heat?
It's back and forth. Yeah, it's back and forth.
I was down at Myrtle
All right.
last weekend, and God, it was 100, and it felt every bit of it. Sam Hood and I were going to go out and play some golf on Friday afternoon, and Sam called. He says, "Dog," he said, "are you nuts?" I said, "No, I'm not." He says, "I'm not either. We'll get it next time."
Right.
Well,
the Charleston area, and it's been this last month. It's just been deadly. It's just been really hot, steamy. It's been bad.
Yeah, and there's a certain point at which the air gets so hot that it's almost impossible to breathe.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You find yourself just kind of gasping and looking for the shade and just someplace not to exert yourself at all.
Yeah.
And I suspect that was so much of the reason why people down were on the seacoast and then headed upland.
Oh yeah.
During the summers and stuff. They just couldn't stand the heat.
Now people got summer homes back up in the hills. Yeah. Got there.
So I think we're going to have a pretty good group tonight. And the book comes out when? November, first part of November?
November 3rd, I think, is a release date. It's already up on Amazon and those places. You can always pre-order.
You can pre-order it now?
Yeah, it gets released, I think, on the 3rd of November. Yeah.
What's what's retailing for?
I have no idea. Yeah. I've worked with LSU Press for the last 40 years. They've done a lot of my books. I love those folks. They're just great. They do a fantastic job with production. I love working with the copy editors, and they do good advertising, and they get it around. They're a really good bunch. And I had several different options with this book, and decided I think I'll go with them. They're a known client.
It's going to start hardback, or is it going to come?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hardback. Yeah.
So, how did you knowing you? I know that you know Jim Clyburn, and have known him for some time. But I was very impressed with his comments as well. That spoke tons about the importance of the book that that he would take himself and blurb it.
Yeah, I wanted to reach out to an audience beyond the usual academic audience, and so I did shoot off copies and got blurbs from Jim McPherson and Gary Gallagher, and those folks have been friends for a long time and who are serious, very serious academicians. But I also wanted just some people who could incite a different type and larger following. And
Yeah,
Jim McPherson, I'm sorry, Jim Claiborne was one of those people I thought of. He was glad to do it. Now he gave it a read and really enjoyed it.
well, he's so involved. I understand, because he's the majority whip. So you always see him in his political role, and of course his undeniable credit for turning the Democrat nominating process around. I mean, I think Biden was dead in the water until Clyburn got behind him.
Yeah.
And that was that. And so I think again that it's important that a guy like Clyburn would pick this up and comment on it, because it's a book I think it's important for everybody. I think anybody who's a serious historian who seriously wants to find some meaning from the Civil War other than just becoming an expert on the Battle of Antietam or Manassas or so forth really needs to look behind these personalities and these stories that move the narrative forward socially.
And I love biographies. I mean, they tell you so much about an era, and to take a extended look at a person who had such an impact, who's been totally forgotten, of course, is exciting. I mean, it's fun. And it illustrates a lot. That you can always put it out in hard academic terms, but I just find it so much more interesting to give it a human context. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I say. Once we got out of the Civil War portion of the book, the book just kept giving. It kept giving more back. And I'm one of those people. I look at things and I look at things as page turners and Velcro books. Both can be very, very useful. Incidentally, Bill Frayling was he wrote the densest books. And when he was writing the books leading into secession and all of this other stuff, take forever to read one of his books, because he'd give you so much to digest on each page that you just literally you could hear the Velcro peeling as you turn the page to go to the next one. And if you got 6 to 10 pages in a read for him, that was a day's work. And then there are some books that just sit there and they write really, really well. All of your Overland campaigns were always page turners. You just hit the nail to where the paragraph flowed naturally to the next paragraph, to the paragraph after that, paragraph after that. Kent Brown's same way. I mean, Kent Brown on book on Meade just impresses the hell out of me. I think it's the best book he has done so far, and the reason for it is that he stayed with the mission. This is a book about Meade in command and commanding at Gettysburg. You don't see anything about Robert E. Lee. You don't see anything about James Longstreet and stuff. The entire book is focused on this man, this 40-something-year-old man, who in the middle of the night, somebody comes up and knocks on his tent and says, "You don't get a choice in the matter. You will take command and you will go with me over to General Hooker's." And then watching this guy and watching how his mind unfolds and how he takes his orders and does all of this and how he reacts to each of these things. It's a fascinating study, and Kent's just turns really well. and what I liked about yours and Swale's was that it didn't get boring when I got out of the water that I'm comfortable swimming in.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, once I left the Civil War and I moved into Reconstruction, there were no awkward periods in the book that I just didn't sit back and ask myself, why the hell am I reading this? It just didn't happen because it was obvious why I was reading it. And the more I read it, the more I wanted to read the next chapter and the next chapter until such time as we found what seems to me to be another Lieutenant Flipper story where a guy gets run out of the place he wants to live in the country that he fought to preserve.
Right.
And
the fascinating thing about it is that he left some detailed memos about it, so that we're able to actually trace it now, which is a very rare event. Yeah.
Well, that's what I like, and that's what I'm sure we'll get into tonight is that you basically, by writing this book, you have opened a door into a period that everybody knows of it. They know it's called Reconstruction. They know it's called Jim Crow and so forth. But this is a book that actually tells you what that was.
Yeah.
And that, I think, if I'm you, that's the measure of success of why you wrote the book.
Right.
Is it people like me and other people who will read the book will have had that door open for them, and we won't just turn right around and walk back out again, but rather it encourages additional work and research and consideration of that period, and that makes us all better citizens and better historians.
Yeah, and it was a new period for me too. I'd never done any detailed research in Reconstruction, and to tell Swales' story, I had his papers, but then I had to get out into the archives and find out about what was going on around him, and then take a look at works by Walter Edgar and all of those folks. And I know a lot of people who work in that field. I mean, and so I was talking with them, and I'd shoot them material, and they'd suggest I take a look at this or that. And so it was a growing process for me to do. But that's what I love writing history, and I love getting into it. I feel like I've just discovered a whole new era, a whole new set of topics.
Well, and I hope, quite honestly, from one friend to another, I hope that circumstances will permit you to continue writing that period.
Yeah.
Because I think it's got to be, once the door is opened, I think people who have street credibility in the Civil War period need to extend that credibility, use some of that capital, and move us forward, move the discussion forward as to why this all mattered. It's more than just Appomattox. It's more than just, Durham Station. It is the country and how we moved on.
Yeah.
So, hey, I'm a believer. He sold me, man.
Oh, hey, great.
and I'm one tough SOB.
I know that. I've known that on you for what? Well, since probably 1994, 95. So
we have been together for 26 years now.
At least.
You and Greg Mertz are the two longest serving historians I've worked with over the years and stuff. And gosh, it's hard to believe it's been 26 years.
It is. And I remember sitting in the airport talking with you, putting together a tour of the Battle of the Wilderness. So that's when my wilderness book came out.
Yeah. And we as we put so many other things together, now here we've got this summary of the Overland campaign work, the five volumes, and the 10 days of touring to cover that. I think is just superb, and I really it's rewarding to see this all come together this way.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I love writing, and I've obviously been a full-time practicing lawyer all these many years, but I'm now at the process of sort of reducing my caseload so I can have more time to do history, which is what I want to do.
Well, we're going to be winners because you do that, and and I look forward to continuing this. Who knows how long I'll stay in this in some sort or another. I imagine, Gordon, I don't think any of us are going to go away. I think we'll know each other until somebody throws dirt in our face,
I suspect.
and we'll probably keep doing stuff and stretching the boundaries a little further to see what else we can glean out of this, and maybe we can teach somebody something.